In my last video, I explained that humans only manage three things: ourselves, our economies, and our environment. Through people managing economies, we use nature to produce everything imaginable, from food and clothing to spacecraft. Just think about it. Every decision you make, or any policy any government makes, will be in the context of addressing either a social, a financial, or an environmental objective. And almost all our decisions and policies have both short and long-term social, economic, and environmental consequences. But did you know that we have recently discovered that none of us are actually born with the need or ability to consider those complex consequences or circumstances when we decide our actions? And that's because we are all born with an identical genetically inherited way of making decisions, which was actually designed to work in a time long before we even learned how to control fire. And in those days, just like any other tool-using animal, our decisions only needed to be made in a simple social context. There were no economic or environmental considerations or consequences to consider because we were not managing those things yet. But fire enabled us to make more and more sophisticated tools and technology which changed our behavior, and we began to be able to manipulate and harm our environment. We'd begun to manage it. And at some point, we also added a financial dimension. Everything we produced came from our environment, and everything was being bought, sold, and used by people. Now, the consequences of our decisions were no longer only social. Our decisions now had inseparable, complex social, financial, and environmental considerations. But we are born with the ability to only make decisions in a simple, single context, without any need to consider complex consequences. So what happened is this resulted in us dividing the inseparable elements of our new complex decisions into simple but incomplete social or financial or environmental contexts. And because our social and economic stability depend absolutely entirely on environmental health, every time we make a decision or policy in the context of any one of those in isolation of the others, it impacts all three, usually later on and often far away from the original decision or policy. Now, the knock-on consequences of managing ourselves, our economies, and our environment in these simpler, separate contexts are evident all around us in the world today. And they're culminating in the symptoms of mass global biodiversity loss, rapidly increasing social and economic instability, megafires, and climate change. And we are researching and managing these complex problems in isolation of each other as separate things, which is why our problems increase year after year, no matter how many conferences we hold or how much money or how much research we do. We are treating symptoms and we're ignoring the cause. We are trying to solve our problems using the same decision-making process that causes them in the first place. So I have written this workbook to show how we can solve the problem by learning to develop and use a broad, complete context to guide and determine our actions, regardless of whether the decision or policy itself is to address a social, financial, or environmental objective. And by using a broader, full context, we are able to easily see and check the potential short and long-term social, economic, and environmental consequences of any action or policy. Now, right now, if you look around the world, our management is causing a steady decline in our social, economic, and environmental stability. Now, this workbook shows us how to make decisions in a new way, which guarantees actions that will result in a steady increase in our social, economic, and environmental stability. And when we do this, we can turn things around, and we will begin to treat the root cause of mass global biodiversity loss and climate change.